Understanding your grappling style and then understanding your partner's grappling style is one of the most effective pieces of knowledge you can have to start progressing your jujitsu. Because once you understand what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, then whenever you are training against that specific person or that specific training partner, you can actually get value out of the round and start to progress. So in today's video, we're going to lay out these different grappling styles and how you can use them to start making your own jujitsu much better. If you're new to the channel, thanks for checking it out. My name is Chasen Hill. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt who's been teaching and training now for over 16 years. So if you like all things jiu-jitsu, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you never miss the latest video whenever it comes out. Now, this is actually the next video here in our training partner series that we've been covering over the last couple of weeks here. So if you haven't checked out the other videos, I'll leave a link to it down in the description with the playlist of all the videos. We did touch on the grappling styles in a previous video, but in this one, we're going to go a lot more in depth. So as a quick overview, I tend to classify the grappling styles into three main buckets, and that's what we're going to be using throughout the rest of this video. Bucket number one is what we call the counter players. So these are people who tend to want to set traps and they like to wait for the perfect timing and the perfect moment when it comes to grappling other people. So they tend to be more passive. And then the second bucket is we have what we call the engine pushers. And these are people who like to dictate the pace of the match. They're always pushing forward. They're never retreating in a way. And so they're always going to be using their athleticism and their aggressiveness in order to control the tempo. And then we have what we call the architect type. And so these are people who really value building systems, thinking logically, focusing on this step and that step moving forward. I think most students, whenever they show up to jiu-jitsu, they fit into one of those three types of buckets. There are some key factors that really dictate why you start to fit into those buckets. I tell you this information not to box you in forever, but to give you a better idea of if you want to evolve into another one, maybe what you need to do, or if you want to take on certain traits of another one, this could maybe inform you on how to do that. One of the first factors is always going to be physical attributes, meaning that your size and physical capabilities are always going to be a key thing that will determine your grappling style. For example, if you're a counter player, you're probably going to be naturally smaller in stature and you might even be a little bit more speedy. Versus if you're an engine pusher, there's a good chance that maybe you're pretty athletic and you're not the smallest of person. The second big factor is always going to be personality type. This would be a good example of the architect because personality of like an engineer or a person who deals with systems or data and thinks in that logical fashion, that personality type, you tend to lean more toward that architect type versus if you're maybe more reserved of a person who likes to kind of know everything and be secure and safe, then you're probably going to be more of that counter player. You're a person who tends to throw caution to the wind and says, just, F it, I'm going to go for it. And I'm just going to push the pace and see where it goes. Then you're probably going to be more of that engine pusher. Each one of these has their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to them. I think if you're a counter player, you're going to be too reserved a lot of the time. So taking on some of the traits of that engine pusher and saying sometimes, F it, I need to go. If you're an architect mindset and you have all of these like logical if then statements built, what I call X's and O's on the paper, but it doesn't translate into the actual match and you don't really thrive in chaos, well, then you need to practice being in a little bit more chaos, be that engine pusher and start to just go forward and drive. The person that throws caution to the wind, the engine pusher, you could probably adopt some of the other things as a counter player, maybe being a little bit more patient, maybe taking your foot off the gas at times, not overcommitting. Understanding these things is really to help you improve your jiu-jitsu, but knowing the weaknesses of where they tend to fail is a massive benefit when it comes to either training against certain grappling styles or improving your own. Now that we've covered those styles, let me know down in the comments, which one do you think you most align with? You might even be a hybrid, maybe a little bit of both, but let me know down in the comments below. So how can we actually now use this information to start developing maybe a little bit of structure or system to our jiu-jitsu? It really can help us start to understand those strengths and weaknesses that we talked about earlier. Then we can start to leverage those things and focus our priority around key areas. The way that I like to do this, speaking of systems and structure, with my own what I call grip system or my grips framework. The G stands for your guard, the R stands for your root bottom game, the I stands for your invading guard pass, the P stands for your peak top game, then the S stands for your standing game. The grips system or framework breaks down jujitsu into 5 core components. It helps with the larger system of your training. Maybe you're a person who already has one built. You could start to apply this to your own logic, or maybe you're that person that has no idea where to get started. So you can use this as a good template moving forward. I did a whole video on this that broke down each of these components in a lot more detail that you can find right here and you can check out after watching this video. What we can do is if we used like a 10-point scoring system for each one of these grappling types, we can already lay out where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are for each one. And then based upon that, that can inform us of what we need to do next. So let's start off by looking at the counter player in a little bit more detail. So as you can see here, we have the grips laid out in a horizontal fashion with each one with its own sort of scorecard that we will use. And our goal is to assign a 10-point, and we can assign a score for each of these components. So you'll see how it works as we go through it. With the counter players, what I tend to see, for example, is that their guard and their root bottom game are a 3. Then if we give the invading guard pass and the peak top game, those might be something like a 1. If we give the standing game a 2, because maybe they're okay at standing, they know how to set counters from standing in a way. So you could quickly see how this area of the root bottom game and your guard are probably much stronger than these other areas. You could go 2 directions with this, depending on what you want to do. You can either say, I'm going to keep leveraging those areas and keep working and keep setting traps and making those areas really good. But maybe you're wanting to improve those other areas, those areas that you're not as good with. So now you could start focusing more of your time and your attention on those areas. If you're training against someone who's a counter player, be careful when they're on the bottom. If they're not trying to sweep, if they're not trying to get on top, then you might want to be very careful whenever you're training against those people because there's a good chance that they're setting up a trap for you. Let's move on to the engine pusher and we follow the same format here. So if we have our scorecard, what I typically see with these people is that their guard and their root bottom games are a score of a 1. And then their invading guard pass and their peak top games are a 3. And their standing game might be a 2. They're able to more force the dominant and top positions a lot more effectively, and they're pushing the pace. You want to think about this being more of a forceful type of style. So they're just doing everything they can to maintain the top position, forcing submissions, forcing top play, looking for maybe kimuras and arms and, quick chokes that they can really just ram down a lot of people's throat. So you could say, I'm going to leverage these areas. Maybe you already know I'm an engine pusher. I have a lot of gas tank. I'm athletic. Then maybe you should start focusing on developing these areas first. Maybe you're saying, you know what? I'm already pretty good at those areas. And so I want to expand. I want to improve my guard. I actually want to develop a little bit more of a bottom game. That's great. You could start focusing on that area as well. These types of students, in my opinion, you want to make them play the bottom. You don't want to fall subjective to their pace and let them just dominate on top all the time. So it's better that you use a little bit more energy to deny them the areas that they feel the strongest against. Get into that technical battle versus just that pushing the pace style of battle. The third and final grappling style here is the architect. And these people make the scorecard very simple. They are probably all 2s across the board. Maybe one area might be a little bit better and one area might be a little bit worse, but they're generally pretty well rounded in most things. If they're on the bottom, they tend to be very calculated and they have a system built. Maybe it's based upon traps or maybe it's based upon them pushing something. So they kind of have characteristics of both of the other two. When they're on top, they have more of a structure that's developed for their top game. They know exactly which pins they're going to try to force and they know which setups exactly they're trying to attack for versus just reacting. The architect type, you kind of can go wherever you want. The hardest part for architects is they don't want to specialize because they want to be good all over. But I think it's good that you kind of branch out and you decide, am I going to become more of a bottom or a counter architect type? Or am I going to be more of a top player architect type? Like, what is my goals? What am I trying to develop? And some of that could be based upon, once again, your physical size. Maybe you're not as athletic as you used to be. So you used to push the top. Now you more play on the bottom. When it comes to training against these architect types, in my opinion, and this is hopefully no offense to you guys, is you have to make it dirty and grimy against them. Like, they thrive if you allow them to play their very specific thing. You'll start to notice patterns that they do over and over again. Try to employ a system of your own and make them have to react to your own system. That is kind of how you throw these people off, or you really start to train against them. Obviously, trying to enact your own system versus theirs, if you're not very good at that, well, then you can't do that. But you could potentially use some physicalness against them, and sometimes that throws them off. There are people who can adopt all of these traits. There are those unique unicorns out there who are usually probably world champions or people who have been training jiu-jitsu for a long time who can flip the switch and become any of these. I know for myself, I was typically more of the counter player at the beginning of my career because of my size and just those natural things. The people who I trained with were much better than me. But then over time, I would say I probably shifted more into that architect. But then there are times where I'm rolling with somebody and nothing is working. My plans aren't working. So I just go and I just try to use some energy and use some force and try to make it a little bit more grimy against a certain partner. The goal of this, it's to help you understand maybe the tendencies and the behaviors that you do. And you may not even be aware of why you do them, but now hopefully you are. If you liked this kind of information, then make sure you check out my free game plan generator that is down in the description below. It's a really good resource to help you start building a game. And I use the script system that we talked about throughout this video in order to start helping you develop that structure. So if you haven't checked that out yet, you can get it down in the description below. If you would like more help developing your own grappling style or improving it and building a system of your own, then you'd probably be a pretty good candidate to work with me inside of my accelerator coaching program. We start off by figuring out where your jiu-jitsu is at or what style you are. And then from there, we can start building a plan in order to start enhancing that. That's one of the better ways to start getting better faster versus following more of a rigid curriculum. This is more of a personalized approach. You'll see a link down below that says work with me remotely, and then we can get you scheduled for an interview process moving forward. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. Thank you guys for sticking around and checking it out, and I'll see you guys in the next one.